The autumn morning of November 15th, 1985, dawned crisp and clear over Kensington Palace. Lady Diana Spencer, now the Princess of Wales, stood before her bedroom mirror, carefully adjusting the silk scarf around her neck. The deep blue fabric matched her eyes, which held a mixture of determination and nervous energy. Today would mark a turning point in royal history, though she couldn't have known it at the time. Down the corridor, Prince Charles paced in his study, occasionally glancing at his watch. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked away the minutes, each sound seeming louder than usual in the tense atmosphere. This interview had been months in the planning, and both he and Diana knew it represented something unprecedented. Never before had the heir to the throne and his wife agreed to such an intimate television conversation about their marriage and their roles within the royal family. The idea for the interview had emerged from a series of meetings between the palace press office and the BBC. Michael Shea, the Queen's press secretary, had been increasingly concerned about the growing speculation in the British press about the Wales marriage. Rumors had been circulating for months about tension between the royal couple, and the palace felt it was time to address these concerns directly with the public. Diana had been hesitant at first. The thought of cameras scrutinizing her every expression, of journalists asking personal questions about her marriage, filled her with anxiety. She had married into the royal family just 4 years earlier, and the constant media attention still felt overwhelming. But Charles had been surprisingly supportive of the idea. He believed that a carefully controlled interview could help them shape their own narrative, rather than leaving it to the tabloids. The BBC had proposed Sir Alistair Burnet as the interviewer. Burnet was a respected journalist known for his diplomatic approach and his ability to ask difficult questions while maintaining a respectful tone. Both Charles and Diana had met with him several times in preparation, though they had been careful not to rehearse specific answers. The palace wanted the conversation to feel natural and spontaneous, even if the topics had been broadly agreed upon in advance. As the morning progressed, the BBC crew arrived at Kensington Palace to set up their equipment. The sitting room had been chosen as the location for the interview. With its warm lighting and comfortable furniture, it would provide an intimate setting that would help viewers feel as though they were guests in the royal home. The cameramen worked carefully to arrange their equipment, testing angles and lighting while palace staff hovered nearby, ensuring that everything met royal protocol. Diana spent the morning in quiet preparation. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a burgundy dress with a simple pearl necklace, elegant but not ostentatious. Her hair had been styled in the soft, layered cut that had become her signature look. She wanted to appear approachable and genuine, the people's princess rather than a distant royal figure. Meanwhile, Charles reviewed his notes one final time. He had thoughts he wanted to share about his role as Prince of Wales, his charitable work, and his vision for his future reign. This interview represented an opportunity to connect with the British people in a way that formal royal appearances couldn't achieve. He hoped to show them the man behind the title, the husband and father who cared deeply about his country and its people. The pressure surrounding this interview extended far beyond the royal couple themselves. The palace communications team had spent weeks coordinating every detail. They understood that one careless word or uncomfortable moment could provide fodder for the tabloids for months to come. The Queen herself had given her approval for the interview, but with a clear understanding that it should enhance, not damage, the royal family's reputation. As noon approached, both Charles and Diana felt the weight of expectation. They were about to participate in something that would be watched by millions of people across Britain and around the world. The interview would be broadcast during prime time, and advanced publicity had generated enormous public interest. Everyone, it seemed, wanted to hear directly from the royal couple about their marriage, their work, and their hopes for the future. The choice of timing for the interview had been deliberate. The royal family had experienced a challenging year, with various scandals and controversies affecting different members. This interview was seen as an opportunity to restore some luster to the Windsor name, and to remind the public of the positive aspects of modern monarchy. Diana had been particularly nervous about questions regarding her charitable work. Since marrying Charles, she had taken on numerous patronages and had begun to develop her own distinct approach to royal duties. She was passionate about causes involving children, the homeless, and those suffering from AIDS, a cause that was still controversial in 1985. She wanted to use this platform to highlight these issues and to show the public that the royal family was engaged with contemporary social problems. Charles, for his part, was eager to discuss his environmental concerns and his views on architecture and urban planning. These were subjects close to his heart, but ones that sometimes made him appear out of touch with ordinary people's concerns. He hoped that by speaking directly to the camera, he could better explain his motivations and show that his interests stemmed from genuine care for Britain's future. The technical crew made their final adjustments as the royal couple prepared to take their seats. The lighting had been arranged to flatter both participants while ensuring that the cameras could capture every expression clearly. Sound engineers tested their equipment one last time, knowing that every word would be analyzed and discussed for years to come. As they settled into their chairs, Charles and Diana exchanged a brief, reassuring glance. Whatever their private disagreements might be, they were presenting a united front to the world today. They understood that this interview could shape public perception of their marriage and their royal roles for generations. The interviewer, Sir Alastair Burnet, took his position across from them. His preparation had been meticulous. He had studied countless hours of footage of both Charles and Diana, learning their mannerisms and speaking patterns. He had crafted his questions carefully, aiming to elicit genuine responses while respecting the dignity of his subjects. Behind the cameras, palace officials watched nervously. They had prepared for various scenarios, but ultimately, once the cameras began rolling, the conversation would be beyond their control. Everything would depend on the royal couple's ability to remain composed and authentic under the intense scrutiny of national television. Diana took a deep breath and smoothed her dress one final time. She thought of the millions of people who would be watching, ordinary families gathered around their television sets, curious about the lives of their future king and queen. She wanted to speak to them as one person to another, to bridge the gap between the palace and the people. Charles adjusted his tie and cleared his throat quietly. He had spent his entire life preparing for this kind of public responsibility, but this interview felt different. It wasn't a formal speech or a ceremonial appearance. It was a conversation, an opportunity to show the human side of royalty. The production assistant held up her hand, counting down the final seconds before filming would begin. In television studios across Britain, technicians prepared to broadcast this historic conversation to eager audiences. Newspaper reporters sat ready to analyze every word for the next day's headlines. The red light on the camera flickered on, and Sir Alastair Burnet looked directly into the lens as he began his introduction. History was about to be made in this quiet sitting room in Kensington Palace. The Prince and Princess of Wales were about to share their thoughts, their hopes, and their challenges with the world in a way that no royal couple had ever done before. The weight of tradition pressed upon them both, but so did the opportunity to define their own legacy. As the first questions began, neither Charles nor Diana could have predicted how this single interview would resonate through the decades, becoming a defining moment not just in their own story, but in the evolution of the British monarchy itself. The stage was set, the cameras were rolling, and the conversation that would captivate a nation was about to begin. In homes across Britain and beyond, families gathered around their television sets, ready to witness this unprecedented glimpse into royal life. The interview that everyone had been waiting for was finally underway. Sir Alastair Burnet's voice filled the sitting room as he posed his opening question to the royal couple. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, and both Charles and Diana seemed to straighten in their chairs as they prepared to speak directly to the British people about their lives, their marriage, and their royal duties. Diana was the first to respond, her voice clear and measured despite the nervous energy that radiated from her posture. She spoke about the overwhelming nature of her transformation from a young kindergarten teacher to the Princess of Wales. The cameras captured every nuance of her expression as she described the challenges of adapting to royal protocol while trying to maintain her own identity. Her honesty was refreshing and unexpected. Rather than delivering the scripted responses that many had anticipated, Diana spoke from the heart about her struggles with the constant media attention. She explained how difficult it had been to adjust to a life where every public appearance was scrutinized, every outfit analyzed, and every gesture interpreted for hidden meaning. Charles listened intently as his wife spoke, occasionally nodding in agreement. When Burnett directed questions to him, the prince's responses revealed a thoughtful, sometimes introspective man who was clearly passionate about his role, but also aware of its limitations. He spoke eloquently about his desire to make a meaningful difference as Prince of Wales, to use his position to highlight important causes, and to serve the people who would one day be his subjects. The conversation naturally turned to their courtship and early marriage. Diana's face softened as she recalled their first meeting at Althorpe, her family's estate, when she was just 16 years old. She had been dating Charles's younger brother Andrew at the time. She admitted with a slight smile, before eventually catching the future king's attention herself. Charles's version of their courtship was more formal, as expected, but he spoke warmly of Diana's youth and vitality, qualities that he said had immediately attracted him to her. He described their engagement period as a whirlwind of preparation and excitement, though he was careful not to reveal too many intimate details about their private moments together. The interviewer skillfully guided the conversation toward more challenging territory. Questions about the pressures of royal life and the expectations placed upon them both drew thoughtful, sometimes surprising responses. Diana spoke candidly about her eating disorder, though she didn't use those specific terms. She described periods of feeling overwhelmed and struggling to cope with the demands of her new role. This revelation sent ripples through the production team, watching from behind cameras. Palace officials exchanged concerned glances, but they remained silent, allowing the interview to proceed without intervention. This was exactly the kind of honesty they had hoped for, even though it made them nervous about how the public would react. Charles addressed questions about his charitable work with genuine enthusiasm. He spoke passionately about the prince's trust, his organization dedicated to helping disadvantaged young people. His eyes lit up as he described meeting young entrepreneurs and seeing how small amounts of support could transform lives. This was clearly where he felt most comfortable, discussing work that gave him a sense of purpose beyond his ceremonial duties. The conversation took on a more intimate tone when Burnett asked about their life as parents. Both Charles and Diana's expressions softened immediately when they began discussing their sons, William and Harry. Diana spoke about trying to give her children as normal a childhood as possible within the constraints of royal life, while Charles emphasized his desire to be an involved, present father despite his demanding schedule. Diana described taking the young princes to McDonald's and to theme parks, activities that seemed ordinary to most families but represented a radical departure from traditional royal child-rearing. She wanted her sons to understand the world beyond palace walls, she explained, to have empathy for people from all walks of life. Charles nodded approvingly as his wife spoke about their parenting approach. He added his own thoughts about balancing tradition with modernity, about preparing William for his eventual role as king while still allowing him to be a child. The prince spoke movingly about his own childhood and his determination to be more emotionally available to his sons than some royal fathers had been in the past. As the interview progressed, subtle tensions began to emerge between the couple. Their body language told a story that their words didn't explicitly reveal. Diana would occasionally glance at Charles when he spoke, her expression unreadable. Charles sometimes seemed to be choosing his words very carefully, particularly when discussing their shared duties and future plans. Burnett, with the skill of an experienced interviewer, sensed these undercurrents and gently probed deeper. He asked about how they handled disagreements and differences of opinion. Diana's response was diplomatic but revealing. She spoke about the importance of supporting each other publicly while acknowledging that they didn't always see eye to eye on every issue. Charles's answer was more philosophical. He talked about the challenge of maintaining individual identity within a marriage that was constantly scrutinized by the public. He suggested that some level of independent thinking was healthy, even necessary, for two people in their unique position. The discussion of their individual charitable interests highlighted some of these differences. Diana had recently become patron of several AIDS-related charities, a cause that was still controversial in 1985. She spoke passionately about the need to combat ignorance and fear surrounding the disease, describing her visits to hospitals and her interactions with patients and their families. Her work with AIDS patients had generated significant media attention and some criticism from conservative voices who felt it was inappropriate for a royal to be associated with such a controversial cause. Diana addressed these concerns directly, explaining that she felt it was precisely because of her position that she could help reduce stigma and encourage compassion. Charles supported his wife's charitable choices, but his own interests lay elsewhere. He spoke extensively about his environmental concerns, his interest in organic farming, and his views on architecture and urban planning. These subjects, he acknowledged, sometimes made him seem eccentric to the public, but he felt strongly that someone in his position had a responsibility to speak out about issues that would affect future generations. The prince's passion for these causes was evident, but so was his frustration with critics who dismissed his views as the eccentric hobby of a privileged royal. He spoke earnestly about his desire to be taken seriously, to have his ideas evaluated on their merits rather than dismissed because of his royal status. As the interview continued, both Charles and Diana seemed to grow more comfortable with the cameras. Their responses became more natural, less guarded. Diana's famous warmth and empathy shone through as she discussed her work with various charities. She had a gift for connecting with people, she explained, and she wanted to use that gift to help those who were suffering or marginalized. The conversation touched on the challenges of maintaining a marriage under constant public scrutiny. Both Charles and Diana acknowledged that this pressure was unlike anything most couples experienced. Every public appearance together was analyzed for signs of happiness or tension. Every gesture was interpreted as meaningful. Diana spoke about learning to develop a thick skin, though she admitted that criticism still hurt, particularly when it involved her children or questioned her motives for charitable work. She had learned, she said, to focus on the positive impact of her work rather than on negative press coverage. Charles addressed the challenge of being constantly judged and second-guessed. He spoke about the difficulty of expressing personal opinions when every statement was treated as a potential policy pronouncement. This was particularly frustrating, he suggested, when discussing subjects like architecture or environmental protection, where he felt he had something meaningful to contribute to public discourse. The technical crew worked seamlessly throughout the interview, adjusting camera angles to capture the most revealing moments and ensuring that the audio quality remained perfect. They knew they were documenting something historic, and their professionalism ensured that every word and expression was preserved for posterity. As the first hour of filming concluded, Sir Alistair Burnet called for a brief break. Both Charles and Diana seemed relieved to have a moment to compose themselves. Palace staff approached with cups of tea and quiet words of encouragement, while the BBC crew made minor adjustments to their equipment. During this intermission, the royal couple had a few moments of private conversation. Their exchange was brief and quiet, but observers noted that they seemed more relaxed with each other than they had at the beginning of the interview. Perhaps the shared experience of opening up to the cameras had reminded them of their common ground and shared challenges. When filming resumed, the conversation would delve even deeper into their personal lives and their hopes for the future. The most revealing moments of this historic interview were yet to come, moments that would reshape public understanding of the royal marriage and set the stage for events that no one in that room could have predicted. As the cameras resumed rolling after the brief intermission, the atmosphere in the Kensington Palace sitting room had subtly shifted. Both Charles and Diana appeared more relaxed, perhaps having grown accustomed to the intense scrutiny of the television lights and cameras. Sir Alistair Burnet, sensing this change, began to explore more personal territory in his questioning. The conversation turned to their different backgrounds and how those differences had affected their marriage. Diana spoke honestly about the challenges of marrying into a family with centuries of tradition and protocol. She had grown up in an aristocratic household, she explained, but nothing had truly prepared her for the rigid structure of royal life. Her voice carried a note of wistfulness as she described her early days as Princess of Wales. She had been eager to please, she admitted, perhaps too eager. The pressure to conform to expectations while still maintaining her own personality had been more difficult than she had anticipated. There were moments, she revealed, when she had felt lost and uncertain about her place within the royal framework. Charles listened to his wife's words with a thoughtful expression. When Burnett asked him about his perspective on Diana's adjustment to royal life, the prince chose his words carefully. He acknowledged that the transition had been challenging for her, but he praised her natural ability to connect with people and her instinctive understanding of public service. The prince spoke about his own upbringing, the years of preparation for his eventual role as king. He had been educated from childhood to understand duty, protocol, and the weight of royal responsibility. This background, he suggested, sometimes made it difficult for him to relate to the shock that newcomers to royal life experienced. Burnett skillfully guided the conversation toward their different approaches to royal duties. Diana's style was spontaneous and emotionally engaged, while Charles preferred careful preparation and formal protocols. These differences, both acknowledged, sometimes created tension, but also brought complementary strengths to their joint work. The interviewer asked about their recent tour of Australia and New Zealand, a trip that had generated enormous public interest and had been widely covered in the international press. Diana's eyes brightened as she recalled the enthusiastic crowds and the warm reception they had received from Australian families. She described moments during the tour that had particularly moved her, meeting Aboriginal communities, visiting children's hospitals, and experiencing the genuine affection of ordinary Australians. The tour had given her confidence, she explained, showing her that she could successfully represent Britain abroad while still being herself. Charles's memories of the tour were more analytical. He spoke about the constitutional significance of their visit, the importance of strengthening ties between Britain and the Commonwealth nations. But he also acknowledged that Diana's natural warmth and charisma had been crucial to the tour's success. The Australian people, he observed, had responded particularly enthusiastically to his wife's informal, caring approach. The conversation took a more serious turn when Burnett asked about their future plans and aspirations. Diana spoke passionately about her desire to use her position to highlight social issues that were often overlooked. She had recently visited homeless shelters and had been shocked by the conditions she witnessed in one of the world's wealthiest nations. Her work with homeless charities had opened her eyes to problems she had never really understood before, she explained. She wanted to use her royal platform to ensure that these issues received the attention they deserved. The cameras captured the intensity of her commitment as she spoke about meeting families living in temporary accommodation and children who had never known a stable home. Charles expressed his admiration for his wife's charitable work while outlining his own long-term vision for his role as Prince of Wales. He spoke about his desire to modernize the monarchy while respecting its traditions to make the royal family more relevant to contemporary British life. The prince discussed his controversial architectural opinions with particular passion. He had recently criticized modern building developments that he felt destroyed the character of British cities. His comments had generated significant debate, with some supporting his views and others criticizing him for interfering in matters beyond his expertise. Charles defended his right to express opinions on subjects that affected the nation's heritage and future. He argued that his position gave him a unique perspective, free from commercial or political pressures, and that he had a duty to speak out when he saw developments that might harm Britain's architectural legacy. The interview delved into their relationship with the media, a subject that clearly troubled both of them. Diana spoke about the difficulty of living under constant surveillance, of never being able to have a private moment without wondering if photographers were nearby. The intrusion had been particularly hard during her pregnancies, she revealed, when she had felt vulnerable and in need of privacy. She described incidents where photographers had used extreme measures to get pictures of her and her children, behavior that she found frightening and inappropriate. The princess spoke about her efforts to protect William and Harry from this attention while still allowing them to have normal childhood experiences. Charles's relationship with the press was more complex. He understood the public interest in royal activities, but He was frustrated by what he saw as superficial coverage that focused on personalities rather than the important work the royal family was doing. He spoke about his desire for more substantive reporting on royal charitable activities and public engagements. The prince addressed rumors about tension in their marriage with remarkable directness. While he didn't deny that they sometimes disagreed, he emphasized their shared commitment to their royal duties and their children. Marriage was always challenging, he suggested, but their situation was complicated by the unprecedented level of public interest in their relationship. Diana's response to questions about their marriage was more emotional. She spoke about the pressure of having every aspect of their relationship analyzed by the media and the public. It was difficult, she admitted, to maintain intimacy and spontaneity when every gesture was scrutinized for hidden meaning. The conversation turned to their hopes for their children's futures. Both parents expressed their desire to prepare William for his eventual role as king while allowing him to have as normal a childhood as possible. They wanted both boys to understand their privileged position and the responsibilities that came with it, but also to develop empathy and understanding for people from all backgrounds. Diana spoke movingly about her determination to expose her children to different aspects of life. She wanted them to visit homeless shelters, to meet people with disabilities, to understand that not everyone lived in palaces. This exposure, she believed, would make them better people and eventually better royals. Charles agreed with his wife's approach, but added his own perspective on preparing William for kingship. The boy would need to understand British history and constitutional principles, he explained, but he would also need emotional intelligence and the ability to connect with people from all walks of life. As the interview progressed, subtle signs of the tensions that would later become public began to emerge. Diana occasionally seemed to defer to Charles on political questions, but her independent thinking was evident when discussing social issues. Charles, for his part, seemed to appreciate his wife's popular appeal, while sometimes appearing frustrated by the media's focus on her at his expense. Burnet asked about their different communication styles and how they complemented each other in their royal roles. Diana acknowledged that she was more instinctive in her approach, while Charles was more analytical. These differences could create misunderstandings, she admitted, but they also meant that together they could reach a broader range of people. The technical crew continued to capture every nuance of the conversation, aware that they were documenting something unprecedented in royal history. The interview was revealing aspects of the royal marriage and the personalities of Charles and Diana that the public had never seen before. As the afternoon wore on, both participants seemed to grow more candid in their responses. Diana spoke about her struggles with bulimia, though she didn't use that specific term. She described periods of feeling overwhelmed and turning to destructive behaviors as a way of coping with pressure. Her honesty was startling and brave, given the era and the context. Charles's response to his wife's revelation was supportive, but somewhat distant. He acknowledged her struggles while emphasizing the importance of professional help and family support. His approach was more formal than emotional, a difference in style that would later become significant. The interview was approaching its conclusion, but the most revealing moments were yet to come. Both Charles and Diana had shared more of themselves than anyone had expected, but the conversation was about to take a turn that would resonate for decades to come. Hashtag the Unforgettable Charles and Diana interview. As the interview entered its final phase, Sir Alistair Burnet posed what would become the most memorable and controversial question of the entire conversation. He asked Charles and Diana directly about their commitment to their marriage and their hopes for the future of their relationship. The question hung in the air for a moment, and viewers across Britain leaned forward in their chairs, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Charles was the first to respond, and his answer would be analyzed and debated for years to come. He spoke about marriage being a partnership that required constant work and compromise. His tone was measured and diplomatic, but there was something in his delivery that suggested careful consideration of every word. He talked about the importance of shared values and common goals, but his language remained somewhat formal and detached. When the prince finished speaking, all eyes turned to Diana. Her response was immediate and heartfelt, delivered with an emotional intensity that contrasted sharply with her husband's more reserved approach. She spoke about love being the foundation of any successful marriage and emphasized her commitment to making their relationship work despite the unique pressures they faced. But it was what she said next that would echo through history. Looking directly into the camera, Diana spoke about feeling isolated within the royal family and about the loneliness that sometimes accompanied her royal duties. Her honesty was breathtaking, given the setting and the formality of the occasion. She revealed a vulnerability that humanized the royal family in a way that had never been done before. The production team exchanged glances behind the cameras. This level of candor was unprecedented, and they knew they were capturing something that would define public perception of the royal marriage for generations. Palace officials watched with growing concern, realizing that this interview was veering into territory they hadn't anticipated. Diana continued to speak with remarkable openness about the challenges of royal life. She described feeling like she was living in a fishbowl, constantly observed but rarely truly understood. The demands of royal protocol, she suggested, sometimes made it difficult to maintain authentic relationships and genuine emotional connections. Charles's reaction to his wife's revelations was carefully controlled, but observers noted subtle changes in his posture and expression. He seemed uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken, occasionally clearing his throat or adjusting his position in his chair. When Burnett asked him to respond to Diana's comments, the prince chose his words with obvious care. He acknowledged that royal life was indeed challenging and that the constant public attention created unique stresses on their relationship. However, his response was more about the institution of monarchy than about personal feelings. He spoke about duty, tradition, and the importance of putting public service before personal considerations. The contrast between their approaches became increasingly apparent as the interview progressed. Diana's emotional honesty and Charles's institutional perspective revealed fundamental differences in how they viewed their roles and their relationship. These differences, while not explicitly stated, were evident to anyone watching carefully. Burnett, sensing the significance of what was unfolding, pressed gently for more details about their future plans. Diana spoke about her desire to continue growing in her royal role while maintaining her authenticity and her connection to ordinary people. She wanted to use her position to make a real difference in people's lives, particularly those who were marginalized or suffering. Charles discussed his long-term vision for modernizing the monarchy while preserving its essential character. He spoke about the need for the royal family to remain relevant to contemporary British society while respecting the traditions that gave the institution its stability and continuity. As the interview drew toward its conclusion, both participants seemed to realize that they had shared more than they had initially intended. Diana's vulnerability and Charles's formal restraint had created a portrait of a marriage under extraordinary pressure, with two very different people trying to navigate an impossible situation. The final questions focused on their hopes for their children and their vision for the future of the monarchy. Both parents spoke passionately about wanting William and Harry to grow up with strong moral values and a genuine understanding of their responsibilities to the British people. Diana's closing comments were particularly moving. She spoke about her love for Britain and her determination to serve the British people to the best of her ability. Her voice carried genuine emotion as she described her gratitude for the support she had received from ordinary families across the country. Charles concluded with thoughts about the continuity of the monarchy and the importance of adapting to changing times while maintaining core principles. His comments were thoughtful and well-articulated, but they lacked the emotional resonance of his wife's words. As the cameras stopped rolling, there was a moment of silence in the sitting room. Both Charles and Diana seemed somewhat stunned by the intensity of what had just occurred. They had revealed more of themselves than any royal couple in history, and the implications of their honesty would only become clear in the days and years that followed. The BBC crew began the careful process of packing up their equipment, while palace officials huddled in quiet conversation about how the interview had unfolded. There was a sense that something significant had just occurred, though no one could have predicted the full impact it would have on the royal family and the British public. Sir Alistair Burnet thanked both participants for their openness and candor. He knew that he had conducted something special, an interview that would be remembered as a watershed moment in the relationship between the monarchy and the British people. The level of personal revelation had been extraordinary, particularly from Diana. As evening fell over Kensington Palace, Charles and Diana retreated to their private quarters to reflect on what they had just experienced. The interview would not be broadcast for several days, giving them time to consider the potential impact of their words. Both seemed to understand that they had crossed a line, moving from formal royal protocol into genuinely personal territory. The editing process would take several days, with BBC producers carefully reviewing every moment of the conversation. They recognized the historic nature of what they had captured and wanted to ensure that the broadcast would do justice to the significance of the interview while respecting the dignity of the royal participants. Palace communications staff worked frantically to prepare for the public reaction to the interview. They had expected a carefully controlled conversation about royal duties and future plans, but what they had received was something far more revealing and potentially controversial. Press releases would need to be crafted and potential follow-up questions anticipated. The interview would eventually be broadcast on a cold December evening, just weeks before Christmas 1985. Families across Britain gathered around their television sets to watch this unprecedented glimpse into royal life. The response was immediate and overwhelming, with telephone lines at the BBC jammed with calls from viewers wanting to share their reactions. Newspaper editors worked through the night to prepare their coverage of the interview, knowing that this story would dominate headlines for weeks to come. Editorial writers struggled to analyze the implications of what Charles and Diana had revealed, particularly Diana's emotional honesty about the challenges of royal life. The interview would mark a turning point in the public's relationship with the royal family. Diana's vulnerability and authenticity had created a new template for royal communication, one that prioritized emotional connection over formal distance. Her willingness to admit to struggles and loneliness had humanized the monarchy in ways that would have long-lasting consequences. Charles's more formal approach, while dignified and thoughtful, seemed old-fashioned in comparison to his wife's emotional directness. The contrast between their styles would become a recurring theme in media coverage of their relationship and their individual royal roles. International media also picked up the story, with news outlets around the world analyzing the interview for insights into the British monarchy and the personal dynamics of the royal marriage. The interview became a cultural phenomenon, discussed not just in Britain, but wherever British royalty captured public imagination. Years later, historians and royal biographers would identify this interview as a crucial moment in the evolution of the modern monarchy. Diana's honesty about her struggles had broken down barriers between the royal family and the public, but it had also raised questions about the sustainability of traditional royal protocols in an age of mass media and celebrity culture. The interview had achieved its original goal of allowing Charles and Diana to speak directly to the British people about their roles and their relationship. However, the honesty and emotion that made it compelling also revealed fractures that would later become impossible to hide. In trying to strengthen their public image, they had inadvertently documented the beginning of its eventual unraveling.